Hello and welcome to another episode, another Thursday of the Gwentlemen Talk Show. As always, I am Dale the White Wolf, joined by Swim. We have Vishra with us from Gwentlemen and our very special guest, R3mark. How is everybody doing today?
I'm great. I'm having a great time. I've really embraced, honestly, the meta that we're in, and it feels good.
Same.
Actually,
You just at a certain point, you just gotta stop fighting it, you know.
give in to your Dagon overlord, Swim. Come on.
I don't know. I was feeling okay with yeah, I feel like I'm cruising through the ladder. I feel like I've got a handle on the meta, and then Gwent comes out with their stats, and they're just like, oh, by the way, Monsters is winning like everything. I'm like, oh, I'm playing the wrong faction.
It's funny you should mention that, because I have opinions on that. We'll get to that later.
We will get to that later. Just a taste.
Oh, interesting.
I know you're shocked, but I have opinions.
But no, so let's go ahead and dive into it before we get too ahead of ourselves. So, R3mark, thank you very much for agreeing to be here with us. Seriously, very much appreciated. And on our special hour earlier time schedule as well, so hopefully it works out better for you. So we're not asking you to stay up till 1 in the morning anymore. That's always been.
Yeah, I hope next time we will have more time. But no, don't worry. It's a great pleasure and a great honor for me to be a part of the talk show tonight.
But maybe you can get... so for anyone who doesn't know R3mark, you're very much involved in the French community for Gwent. I mean, you bring a lot of passion, a lot of energy to it. And, you know, it's kind of... I don't know, maybe you could tell a little bit about it in your own words of, you know, how you came to Gwent and what you've been trying to accomplish with the French community.
A few years ago, I was working for a national association of esports from Overwatch, Hearthstone, and Heroes of the Storm. And after many months, or 1 or 2 years, with tournaments each week, each month, it was very, very hard for me to follow my team because I had to plan and to know when there will be training, when they will be fighting, and when they have to move for tournaments in France everywhere. So at point I said, okay, I want to stop. I want to play some RPG. I bought The Witcher 3 White Hunt, and I spent many time playing it. And I was very, very sad when the game was over after Blood and Wine, and maybe I had to stop during 10 days to play on my computer because I was very, very sad. And one day I saw that CD Projekt will create a new game, and I said, okay, I will be a part of this game because I need to continue. I need to be with Geralt, Triss, and Yennefer, and Ciri a few times. I need to be in the in the continent, in the story again and again and again. And so I start Gwent on the first day of the closed beta, and there were nothing. Nobody was streaming. Nobody was writing about it in France, I mean. And we had only the Gwentlemen. And I said, oh, why don't we create the same thing in France? Why can't we have the Gwentlemen in France? But I felt very alone at first, but I didn't stop, and I tried to increase and to improve Gwent in a French community. And I start to meet a lot of people. Like I remember I made an interview of Vishra, of Dunkero, of Powell, and I translate some article from Gravez, and that's how I start to work on Gwent. It was very with a lot of passion because I just wanted that game because famous, because I think it's a lot of better than Hearthstone or other games I played.
I just want to personally thank you for all that you've done as well for the community, because it's always one of the really cool things, and one of the things that drew me into Gwent in the first place whenever I started streaming. It's just, we've always seemed to have had a very inclusive community, and it's a community that really wants to help push the game forward. And I just want to thank you for your part in doing it, because it's awesome. It's an awesome community. I really like the direction that it's continuing to go. But no, so seriously, thank you for being here for the talk show. But let's go ahead and open up with our first topic of discussion. So just last week, we had the Gwentlemen's Open for July. If you didn't get a chance to check it out, stay tuned. We are going to have one in August. But I just want to go let's round the table. I know Swim, Vishra, myself, we got a chance to cast it on Monday. If you missed that, the VODs are up on our YouTube over at youtube.com/Team Gwentlemen. But what is probably your single favorite moment from the TGO? Just round the table. Anybody who has one from this past TGO?
Well, I don't know about a single moment, but I think it was very exciting overall. There's two things that were very unique about it that stood out to me, and that was specifically, the Mago face showdown, and just the fact that Jemai ended up making it so far, just being kind of a bit of an underdog hero.
I can't remember who it was. It was someone in their top 8 match who lost the coin flip 4 games in a row.
Mago?
I found that amusing. Was that Mago who lost it? No, I remember. I think it was someone else who lost like every single coin flip, and it still went like 4 or 5 games. But as someone who suffered through that in like the day 2 of a tournament before, I appreciated it.
I think for sure Oh, go ahead. All you.
No, I said unfortunately I couldn't watch this TGO, but usually I try to keep an eye on it, and it's a real pleasure to see such a tournament on Gwent, and I hope we will see more tournament invitational. You did in the past maybe 1 or 2 tournaments on invitation. Maybe we will see it later.
Yeah, we did. The last one was February?
Yeah, it's been a while for the Golems invitation.
February and March.
I believe it was February.
We need one more. We need one more because they're pretty interesting to watch.
Soon TM.
Soon. Soon.
I will say we are working on something along those lines, but stay tuned a little bit longer. Stuff's cooking. But no, going back to this Gwentlemen's Open for July, probably my favorite part has got to be Jemai's story. Like the fact that it's the thing that I've always liked about tournaments is that you hop into them, and it's the thing I always like about the Gwentlemen's Open. Anybody can join, and you just see how far you can go. And with for Jemai, it's just a perfect example of you can hop in and bring your best, bring your A game, and you can make it far even if you've never done a tournament before. And it's just it really makes me happy about it because it's always cool thing with tournaments is that they're not ladder play, they're not casual play, they're their own type of thing, and you really need to be able to get into a tournament in order to...
it's happening again.
Oh, no. Vishra, we've lost your web. Oh, and there he is again. But no, it's something that you need to get into and experience before you can really... it's not something that you can just be like, oh, I think it's like this. Until you really get into it, you don't know. And that's where I always like that we have, 3 weekly tournaments go on every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. We have the Gwentlemen's Open, we have Passive Flora, and we have more stuff in the works, but just a teaser. But let's go ahead and let's shift our topics a little bit. So we've had this hotfix, patch, whatever you want to call it, for...
They're not hotfixes anymore, Dale.
I think this one was called a hotfix.
It's not a hotfix, though. Mid-patch.
They called it that, though.
At that point, it is a patch. Semantics.
But so we've had, what, a week? A little over a week and a couple days, I think?
It's been about a week and a half now, right? Somewhere around there?
It was not 8 days. It was on Wednesday. 8 days ago.
Like close enough.
But so we've had a chance for really the meta to start settling, I feel, because it always, right after a patch and everything's up and for air, it's just like, man, like maybe this will work, maybe that'll work. No one really knows, but you give it a little bit of time, a week or so, and you start seeing maybe not what the final meta will look like for this patch, but we start seeing where it's shaping up to be. And let's go ahead and start talking about that a little bit, I think. So I think one of the couple of the real strong picks early on that's kind of continued on, I heard Reveal Nilfgaard and Consume Monsters But of those, I really only hear about consume monsters nowadays.
Yeah, Nilfgaard has that classic thing where just, in general, a faction is really difficult to play. So I think a lot of people steer away from it because it's not very forgiving. If you do something, like if you make 1 or 2 mistakes with it, that in other factions, it might lose you the round at worst. With Nilfgaard, it loses you the entire game. So it's just a faction that a lot of people, I think, steer clear of because of that.
Yeah, basically. I mean, everyone got kind of very excited. Everyone really likes Reveal. Reveal has never really been like, solidified as really like a tier 1 archetype, and everyone kind of always wanted it to be. And Spotters got buffed, and I guess Sarah got buffed as well. But ultimately, they have some problems of their own. Basically, their game plan is a little too disruptible. They basically just want to smash tempo with Morven foot soldiers and Carryover with Spotters in round 3. And there's just so many ways to play around that. It's a very, very linear kind of style of play.
Can we just stop and appreciate just how strong Sarah is, by the way? That card's a 9 strength silver that doesn't actually have an upper limit on what it does to your hand. That's kind of insane, actually, when you think about it.
I think it's pretty interesting because at the moment you can play plenty of deck, plenty of factions, plenty of archetypes. You don't have to play just one type of deck, one type of metagame. I think it's actually this patch or this hotfix is the most balanced since the beginning. Maybe since Nilfgaard, when the Nilfgaard was released, and. Maybe actually we see like Swim said, Nilfgaard reveal, but I think people should try to play plenty of faction, plenty of archetypes. They should not I lost my word. Forget, excuse me. We are just in beta, so we have to try everything, every card. We don't have to focus on the most powerful faction or powerful archetype. What do you think about?
Yeah, basically. That's one of the best things about Gwent, honestly.
I think that's what we've kind of seen this meta has been, a couple of, as I mentioned, a couple of early strong decks coming out, but then it's kind of, I don't think I have queued into the same deck more than twice, like a play session for a few hours. Like, it's so diverse right now. And it's one of the things that I really like about the meta, where we're kind of seeing, what's getting stronger, what's not, but it's still a lot. It's not like, man, like, this is the deck to play, this is the other deck to play. It feels like it's more diverse right now. Sorry, Vishra.
Yeah, well, no, it kind of feeds in like what you were saying. I know a lot of people are instantly jumping on the recent, since we brought it up and it's going to get mentioned anyway, and might as well discuss it. The Gwent Up team released their most recent stats a couple of days ago, and it showed that monsters in general was like well ahead of the pack, whatever. I don't think that's a good idea for the community to just jump on right away, because incomplete data, which is what they have, is not something you can base conclusions off of. They have a very limited sample size, and the devs have come out and said that it's actually like not as bad as I think it is, and that overall the meta is actually pretty diverse. Like, I know that I've seen every single faction playing at a fairly high rank lately. Everything from Queensguard, that I saw Camby yesterday, multiple different Nilfgaard decks, like you name it, I've probably seen in the last couple of days, even on stream. So I don't think that any of those factions don't have a competitive deck right now, which I think is a good thing. I don't think you can expect much more than that, though. Like, people are obviously going to eventually find the most competitive deck, and they're going to gravitate to it. That's how card games are. People want to win games, so you play something that's competitive. But yeah, I think that right now the meta is actually not in a bad spot. I think that there's a pretty healthy diversity overall in terms of different archetypes. Some might be a little bit strong right now, but I also don't think there's anything in the meta right now that's oppressive or that's clearly above everything else, especially if you start playing tech cards for it. Like, if you don't tech cards against certain decks, you're going to lose. Dwarves is a great example of it, and Swim knows from experience what happens when people start to tech that. So we'll see what happens. I'm really interested in the next week where things solidify and what decks start to jump out ahead of the others.
Yeah, I do agree with, at the very least, the part of what you're saying, which is basically that people are kind of overreacting a little bit and maybe a little bit bandwagoning. I mean, for the most part, there is a lot more viability than people give it credit for. I personally don't have high. I don't see too much high potential in Nilfgaard right now, but I see everything else being super viable. Absolutely.
I will say I've been enjoying Nilfgaard the most actually, and I shamelessly stolen from the top 16 deck list, or top 8 deck list. I don't remember which one we posted.
Top 8.
Top 8. I have been completely just shamelessly stealing Mego's thin Nilfgaard sort of deal with Siri Dash, and that has been so much fun to play. Mostly just for being a chance to play Siri Dash again. It's been a couple of months before a deck really showed up that she worked really well in, and I think that it's been a lot of fun for me just be playing Nilfgaard right now. I tried out Swim's Dwarfs, and then for about a day.
Honestly, no, don't worry about it, man. It's not as easy as it seems. No. You think I'm subtly. No. You think I'm subtly flaming you? I'm not.
That's like not subtle at all, Swim. That's very blatant.
Okay, Vishra. Hang on. That deck is not that easy.
It's pretty cool to fight against your Swim Dwarfs, because people are trying to play them, but they are pretty hard to master. So it's easy to win against them in one.
Absolutely.
So that's cool.
Yeah.
Keep going with this kind of deck. It will be easy for us. Please.
No, it was fun to play around with it, but it very much felt like, all right, do they have the counter? And they do, I lose. So a little one-dimensional in that regard.
What's the counter?
You queue in a control Scoia'tael who has 4 Scorches and a Villain Tret, and we're wait a minute, that's why I don't play this deck.
Well, okay, don't queue into control Scoia'tael.
That's what I was doing wrong. But so,
you queue into an Emir and they just reset Peter on you repeatedly. That one's fun too.
Well, so I think Vishra brought it up a little bit, so we'll go a little bit more into it. And actually, I think I brought it up originally, but the Gwent up stats, and I think that I agree with you guys where it looks very damning from the. If we just look at the stats as they are, where it's like, man, like what struck me as odd is that you're seeing monsters as consistently above like 55% win rate, and then no other faction even gets to 50%. No other leader even gets to 50%. The next highest is like 48, and right off the bat, this just makes me feel like the stats are a little skewed. And I don't think it's anything that they're doing wrong. They're not doing anything wrong with their stat reporting. It's the fact that they don't have all of the numbers. They only are getting numbers from the people who have the Gwent Up tracker installed and are playing with that. And if you look at that compared to how big of a player base we have versus how many of them have the Gwent Up tracker, and you got to remember that there's 2 competing Gwent trackers going on, and it's incomplete stats. And I believe that we had Rethals come out and basically say that is that you guys aren't seeing the whole picture here, and that these numbers aren't exactly where you think they are. And I think that's something to keep in mind whenever we're doing that. But that being said, I do feel like Monsters is in a pretty good state this patch, mostly because they didn't really get messed with too much. And actually, I think Consume might have gotten a few buffs here and there, but it always feels to
me, got buffed.
Yeah, it always feels to me like whenever you see a new patch, anytime you're just like, okay, what worked in the past? This type of thing worked in the past. Does it work now? Yes, it does. All right, Consume Monsters, top tier.
Yeah, I mean, basically. Another thing about the Gwent Up stats that, I mean, this is a bit of a hot topic in the last few days since they've been released, but where's the MMR cutoff that it tracks? I mean, most of the people, I think, look at, like, the high MMR range.
Yeah, it's under 2K, 2K to 3K, then 3K plus is what it tracks. So that's actually like a really wide bracket for each of those, especially like the 3K up. That's actually a
3K
very
up
large bracket.
That's the one most people are kind of talking or complaining about, or at least like that's what I'm seeing the most. People are like, Dagon has a 60% win rate and everyone else is terrible. But I mean, I can say from experience in terms of like the top ranks, it's pretty diverse, more so than the stats would let you believe. And yeah, I mean, it just really is kind of an incomplete picture, especially because there's so many different decks that these play. I will say Dagon is a very powerful deck, but it's also very counterable, and people are targeting it more effectively at the higher ranks. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's one of those things. No, sorry, go ahead.
No, I said. I will be a little bit rude, but I think it's easier for people to cry about something than to try to be better and to increase it. So Every time I see someone who is crying or whining about something like Dagon, I just don't trade the topic because it's, like I said, it's easier to cry than to increase the level.
No, that's true. I've done both, and it is definitely easier to just cry about it.
Yeah, it's easier to cry.
If something's beating you, you've got two options. You either adapt to it and you try and find ways around it, or you complain enough that the developer nerfs it. And people are just opting
or you join them.
Or they join them, yeah, that's fair.
Or you join them. I don't know what you're all complaining about. I love monsters. I love this bandwagon.
Like Darwin said, the one who will survive is the one who will adapt. It's not the stronger, it's more easy to adapt. So if you don't want to adapt yourself to the metagame or everything, you can cry, you can whine. We don't care because we will climb the ladder and not you. If you stop crying and try. It's like in Dark Souls, it's get good or get wrecked. That's all.
Yeah, I've never understood that argument that people have where they're just like, well, this deck is overpowered. I'm like, well, you have this counter available to you, but I don't want to alter my deck to put those counters into it. It's like, that's part of, when you build a deck, part of what you have to account for is that you need to have some kind of answer to something. If you're playing a linear all-in thing, don't complain when you can't answer something or when something does something better than you. It's always kind of struck me as really odd when people just kind of completely ignore that angle of deck building and don't understand why they're losing to this one deck or why this one deck is so good. It's because you aren't building to beat it. And it's something that you see a lot of deck builders who are doing very well on the ladder. They start to incorporate things into their deck and into their strategy that not only help their strategy, but they also help counter the popular strategy right now. The biggest thing I can think of right now is where people are playing Radovid control decks, and they're playing things like Redanian Knight and Stemmelford's Tremors because they counter the popular monster deck. Like, you incorporate these things that work naturally with your deck, but also hose that other deck. So if more people would do that, they'd probably see more success in the ladder.
Absolutely. And Yennefer, for me, lately, Yennefer has been a huge example of that. I've been running Yennefer and Dwarfs. It's great. She's a huge synergy.
I had someone blow me out for, I think it was somewhere around 80 points, and it would have been more eventually, because they Cure Met's Epidemic to my board after Itris Butterfly. So like they got rid of like 20 units, and then we still went 4 more turns that would have ticked with it. It was disgusting. But like small things like that help your strategy anyway and help you adapt. So I don't know.
I remember the first time we saw Swim trying the dwarf deck. Maybe it was in January or February. Nobody thought it was possible to win with that kind of deck. And now we could see them everywhere. So people should try new things to adapt and to counter something. They need to move. They need to try. And okay, they will lose some games. But if they keep trying, they will create a new game or maybe a new meta game. And we will see the Swarm deck disappear, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's go ahead and move on a little bit from the meta, but not really. So, specifically, going back to the Gwent up stats, I believe they had listed Dagon as a 16.38% win rate. I think
somewhere around there.
Somewhere around 60%. But let's talk about Dagon, specifically Dagon.
Oh baby.
Because I mean, he's been around a while, and he's gotten some, not really many changes, but a few. So let's take it back to the very beginning of the closed beta, whenever he was just, spawn one of 3 different weathers, and this is back with old weather too. And I don't remember really seeing many people complain about him. I think it was a lot of people playing Aridin just because it was like, hey, I have put a bunch of stats on the board, and that's back when Aridin was gold too. But I feel like most of the changes and where Dagon really started to take off is whenever he got access to First Light and the First Light change, where now he's able to not only, clear weather if he needs to, but now he can also rally out units, and that's where I think he really took off, because it was now just, instead of being just a weather play, you're now also being like, well, maybe I want to just dig through my deck some. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, basically, he got the First Light change. He became much more popular, and then we went into open beta, yeah? And he got, well, I mean, weather as a whole got reworked. The first light was stripped. Actually, I believe that was that in the open beta transition, or was that right before?
Yeah, no, that was open. Right. That was during the transition.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and now, but, you know, everybody, I don't know, the new weather is kind of so hard to evaluate as a concept. Like, you know, when it came from closed beta to open beta, nobody knew exactly how strong this new weather that ticked over time would be. When it came time for that to get nerfed, which we saw very recently, nobody knew exactly in what state weather would survive. It turns out it's still pretty good. But the biggest thing about Dagon right now is probably just his ability to summon foglets. I mean, like, you were talking about people preferring Dagon, Aridin over Dagon. That's something that happened very early on in terms of the open beta. Just like first few days of open beta, a lot of people were playing Aridin. People were ignoring Dagon. But and then people realized that foglets were pretty ridiculous, and they make up the difference between, you know, Dagon and Aridin's strength levels in terms of being able to add the strength on the Hound as well, in addition to giving you some thinning and making up the difference between the strength levels of Fog and Frost at the time, because Frost was probably a little better at the time as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like Dagon, I remember saying that it needed a buff back then, and it actually did wind up getting I think 1 point added to it. It was a 6 and is now a 7. No, it didn't get that.
No, that's
never mind. It's still a 6. Yeah. I think they were. I don't remember if they were thinking about it or what was going on with that, but like Dagon wasn't played for the first month of open beta or something like that. And it was because it felt like a weak leader. I think overall what has happened is that we've seen the meta shift, and with the weather changes and just what people are playing now, Dagon kind of gets to thrive right now because people weren't really learning ways to interact with what it's strong at. It's strong with the whole foglet package, and that's basically it, honestly. Like, outside of the foglet package, you don't really use Dagon anymore. It lost its versatility without first light and rally effects. It effectively, like, if you want the frost, you go with Wild Hunt instead. So its niche is as a foglet deck now. And with the way the meta was going, we were seeing decks stack vertically. We were seeing high-power dwarf carryovers, consume carryover, emperor brigades, you name it. We saw like 3 or 4 gigantic bronze units and then nothing else wide. So when people are running a Scorch meta, when people are running an Igni meta, things like that, then you can instead counter that by going wide. And Dagon does that better than any other deck right now. And I think we've kind of seen the meta evolve and shift that way, where decks are starting to spread sideways, and they can do that with the weather change. And I think it's a great part of the weather change, actually, that's kind of been overlooked, is that decks can now go back to that old strategy where you can put 10, 12, 15 units out in one round, and you're not super punished by it with the weather effect. And I think that's great.
Yeah. I think as well, one of the biggest things about Dagon is that when it did come time for the weather nerf, and Dagon at this point is basically representative of Fog. When you think Dagon, you think Fog right now. There's certain situations where you might not cast Fog with him, but he's the Fog archetype leader. But in terms of Dagon being able to survive these nerfs, many people are, you know, kind of, I guess, wondering like how exactly Monsters is able to survive so many nerfs. When it comes to this one specifically, Fog is the weather that got nerfed the least by a pretty decent margin, because of course Fog before had such a hard time actually being able to hit multiple units compared to the others, that its ability to have that having that ability removed just doesn't really hurt it as much, and you still have the foglets as well.
I think the strength of Dagon comes from no one is playing Clear Sky anymore. At first, we had when we create a deck, we put 3 Clear Skies on one. It was, for example, it was either Yaman or Death Mold or everything else in each faction. So we had 4 Clear Sky, and maybe we have the decoy, so we have 5 Clear Sky. Actually, people play with 1, 2, maybe 2 Clear Sky on the mage. So it's not pretty much. So of course, Meteo became stronger because there is no Clear Sky. So people should put more Clear Sky in their deck, and Meteo will become less and less powerful. I think that's the real strength of Dagon. It's people stopped played with Clear Sky.
What do you think the strength of the deck comes from foglets and the weather specifically, or from that deck, from that section of that deck interacting so well with the other half of it, with the carryover from Harpy and Earth Elemental? Because that's a big part of it. I feel like that's a big part of it.
Yeah,
I think it's a combo. It comes from the RPs, from the foglets, or from a lot of things. And if you let all the deck playing, For example, it's the same with a monster consume. If you let the deck eat, the Grave Hack will be very, very strong at the end of the game. So you have to stop. You should not let the deck play or the game alone. You have to stop him. And Dagon, you have to stop him on the foglets with a clear sky. If you let your opponent build his victory, of course he will win. You have to stop him before. You have to play against him. You don't have to play with your mind, with your eye closed and just I drop my cards and I will try to win at the end. No, you have to build your own victory and to destroy your opponent's victory. And I think you can break Dagon with clear sky. So you will, for example, actually the Woodland Spirits, when you play him at the end of the turn 3, you could have 8 or 9 foglets. But if you have 8 or 9 foglets, it's because your opponent let you have 9 or 8 foglets. He has to destroy you. He has to play against you. If he lets you play, he will lose. And it's the same for Grave Hag. If you let your opponent play with Consume, he will win. So you are the part of the problem if you lose. It's not only your opponent or only the mulligan. You have to build your own victory. That's what I think.
Oh, well said. But so,
well, I wanted to.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna ask Vishra, what you were saying Carryover represents pretty much a large concern in terms of this deck's strength. You're saying it represents a large portion of that, and I really agree. I mean, the thing about Carryover is it's strongest when you have even a little bit of it, right? You don't really need more than a little bit because, of course, that little bit of Carryover, that 1 egg, 2 eggs, 1 Earth Elemental, whatever, prevents the dry pass and allows you to even get ahead of them and stay ahead of them in round 2. And being able to secure those carryovers committally with bronzes, just a small amount of carryover in a way that's not disruptible by just like a zap. Because like Mahakam Defender just dies to a zap, and that doesn't matter to him at all. But if you can't even zap an Earth Elemental, you can't zap the eggs. There's fewer ways to actually get rid of those and actually without trading down. You can obviously get rid of them, but you have to trade down. And the Earth Elementals and the Harpies are basically the 2 only bronzes in the game that can so easily and reliably secure that carryover, and they're both in monsters.
I don't know if it's that. I think a big portion of it, like they give you the carryover, yeah, but the big portion of it is that the deck gets to fight from 2 angles. And it's one thing that we see with Dagon specifically, not as much Consume or Aridin decks, but like those both can run that package if they want to. But we see it most with Dagon, is where Dagon gets to run the Death Wish package, right? They get to run the 3 Harpies and the 3 Earth Elementals and have that, and you can attack that angle. But they also get to run the Foglet and the Weather package. And to attack both angles is actually, it's really tough to attack both of those 2 angles at once, which is part of where that deck strength is actually at, is that the answers to beating that, which is things like full board clears, like Yennefer, Stammelford, stuff like that, are very, very rare. Or not even that they're rare in being made as cards, that they're rare seeing play. People don't play Yennefer in a non-swarm deck. It just doesn't happen because they don't think about it as being an answer for that, but it really is. You can absolutely destroy that deck, both halves of that plan, by doing something like a Yennefer.
Yep.
And while I think that the deck might have a little bit too much power at times, I don't think, I think that what we'll see is people are going to start to adapt to that and realize that you can attack both those angles very efficiently, but if you don't play those answers, and they're kind of unique answers in that way, the same as like Dwarves require Scorch and Igni and very specific things like that, that you can't fight both those angles. They're just too efficient at both those angles. So I think that's part of like what makes the deck so good right now. We'll see going forward whether or not people can do that or not. But I do think that the carryover angle is one that might be overlooked a little bit. I think it's fine where it is. I think that the power level of Earth Elemental and Selena Harpy are probably about where they should be right now. If you make them any weaker, they don't see any play at all. But we'll see. We'll see if people can start to, going forward, now that it has a target on its back, adapt and play cards that are very effective against that naturally.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree that it is a deck that is very, very easy, or not the easiest, but it is extremely possible to adapt to it and tech against it. I mean, it's been running away in a meta where people aren't really running their single weather clears. Like, nobody was really running Archgriffins in the first few days, and I've seen them come back really, really, really quickly in terms of the top ranks in the last, like, only 48 hours or so, really. and the deck is losing some value off of that.
Epidemic, man. Epidemic.
Yeah.
PTSD.
That's funny. Epidemic is kind of... It's been there for a while, but I think, especially with this meta and the way that people are trying to... Especially with Triss Butterfly and the Swarm, where Epidemic's just like... You realize I can have a Reverse Scorch, but I have 3 of them.
I have it attached to a gold body that can also be a Thunderbolt potion. Okay.
Yeah.
Seems fair, man.
But you talk about weather. This update in general really kind of has been... I mean, officially, to the patch before this was the weather update, which changed 2 gold weathers, and then this one kind of changed the rest of them. Mainly, it really feels like it's the bronze weather has been always... I mean, granted, you can run 3 of them, so you're always seeing a lot of bronze weather in comparison to the other weathers. I think that fog has probably been, as Swim mentioned earlier, one of the better weathers right now, as it got changed the least. But how do we feel about weathers in general right now? Because it's gotten a lot of changes from closed beta to open beta to the weather update to the weather update part 2. Do we feel like it's still going in the good direction? Do we feel like it's in a good spot now? Do we think that, like, I mean, especially with pre this patch, it felt like the weather was everywhere and clear skies were everywhere because they needed to be to counter it. But outside of the Dagon deck, specifically, outside of like the foglet patching, do we feel like weather's in a good spot, or does it still need to be tweaked further?
I'm probably the most happy with it now than I've ever been. I feel like it's in a very good spot overall.
Yeah. I'm torn. I think that right now the big thing with weather and what you'll see going forward, and CDPR has kind of hinted at it with their dev cycle with the cards they've released, is that bronze weather now is at such a low power level, and it actually is, since it has a finite amount of damage it can do each turn, is that if it's not attached to another card, it doesn't bring strength in some other way, you really won't have it see play. We don't see spell decks anymore, like how we saw Spelltell and Spellguard last patch. We see you have to run Wild Hunt Hound, you have to have Foglets in your deck, you have to run Aretuza Adept to actually play these weathers in your deck. And I think that going forward, we'll probably see more cards like that, where cards might summon a bronze weather from your deck or interact with it some other way. But we're done with the days where we saw people just running them because of how powerful they are, and that's probably a good thing. I think it leaves them a bit more space for development with different weathers in the future, which is a good thing too. I think it's a key part of Gwent. You have to leave room for expansion with that mechanic. But overall, I think it's probably the best power level it's ever been. It's the most balanced in terms of power that we've ever had in Gwent.
What do you think, Remark?
I think we should come back to the Gwent spirit in the Witcher. We should put a limit on the number of special cards you could use in a deck. At first, the Gwent in the game was the objective was to put as much as powerful creature as possible, not spell like in Spelltile. We should limit. The studio should limit the number of special cards, so it will be a nerf of the weather. It will be a nerf of Spelltile on everything based on spells, and we should focus on the creators. That's what I think. It's a patch I hope one day we will see.
Now, Vishra, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you disagree with that stance. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty patently against that idea. I think that doing that as an artificial limit that shouldn't exist. It works fine for The Witcher 3 because that's a single-player game, and it's fine to limit single-player stuff. And that entire game, it wasn't meant to be balanced anyway, as we can tell by their having 0-strength spies that draw 2 cards. But when you artificially limit someone like that, it creates restrictions within deck building that I think are bad for the player base, and I don't think it adds anything relevant to the game. I think that spell decks should exist. I think they should do more to push people that a spell archetype can exist, like Spelltell and Spellguard did. They might not have been healthy in that iteration, but it's still a really fun and unique way to approach a game. And I think that having those unique archetypes, those things that are completely different than what exists otherwise, like slamming 8-strength bronzes, 10-point silvers, 12-point golds, I think it's a really good interaction. I think it's a really healthy thing for a game to develop that way.
But you You talked about some artificial limits, but for example, you have limits on the number of gold cards you can use, on silver cards you can use. So what's the difference? You can put a limit on how many spells you could use. So you will have to play as much as mob as possible, and it will be a different game, of course, but it will be, in my opinion, closer to the mind of the Gwent at first.
Because we already have limits in the game. Like you said, we already have some artificial limits in the game, and those limits are already dictated by the border rarity, right? So we already do have some kind of limit in the game. I don't think that we need even more, because then it's just entering into a realm where you as a player like, well, I have to restrict this, and this now. Oh, and I can't have spells across this amount, etc. I just don't think it's needed. Like, I think that... Do you think that spell decks at their heart... Like, I know how much you played in the last meta with Spellguard and Spellitel and the Spell Northern Realms and all those other decks, how much you actually did with them. But... Like, I understand that they were overpowered. I don't think anyone's going to argue that they were a little bit too strong with how weather worked at the time. But do you think that the overall idea of that deck, that it's based around spells, is a bad thing for the game?
It depends to the extent. It honestly depends on... It depends on the... Sort of, yeah. Well, okay. So here's the thing. Here's one thing I might say. So Vishra, you were saying that spell decks were fun. That's correct? I believe that's the word you used, right?
I mean, I personally find it fun because they work like a puzzle to me, and I like that idea. And it basically, I enjoy decks that are unique in how they function and how they function from you as a player perspective, right? Spell decks are basically, you look at this hand and you have like, your entire deck has like 6 units maybe, right? And at least the iterations we've had so far. Maybe that changes in the future. But you have this hand of spells that don't give you strength. And part of the way that Gwent works is you have to have points to win a game. So if you don't have points in those spells, you have to figure out how to use those spells efficiently to stop your opponent's strength and then get your own like very small amount of strength out. And I like that idea. I think it's a really cool thing. And again, I don't think anyone's going to argue that the way that Spellguard and Spellitel and all the other decks worked last meta was healthy, because it obviously wasn't. But I think that it adds something to value when you have that type of a deck exist.
Yeah, I mean, so from a personal perspective, like me as a player, I would actually agree. I find very personally that spell decks are unique. They're different. They open up a lot of possibilities, not just in terms of deck building, but in terms of how you can even play the game through different lines of play. But in terms of like the general population, and in terms of like, I wouldn't call those decks fun. I would say that I enjoy the concept of them. But from a very objective standpoint, I don't think they can really be considered necessarily promoting a great mindset in terms of the people that have to play against them.
Well, I mean, if you've ever played Magic at all, Magic the Gathering, one of the key like archetypes overall is a control deck, which we've seen in Gwent. Gwent kind of takes control in a different route, but traditional blue control decks in Magic have very few units. They focus primarily on spells, and they function around a few units to win the game. And I think it's overall shown that it can be a healthy type of thing and exist in the game for a long time, because Magic's over 20 years old and has had plenty of those formats come and go, and it's something that has proven to be popular with players. So I think that ignoring that part of a card game is probably a bad idea on CDPR's side of things, to be honest, because there's a large portion of players that play card games who have shown that they like this kind of play style. So I think the trick here will be marrying that with Gwent, since Gwent is so unique in so many different ways.
Yeah, I think I kind of strike the middle ground between you guys, because I do like the fact that there is that element to the game where it is a unique way of playing. You always see that in, I think, any card game, really, where there's always, you know, the way that most people play, and then there's always like those fringe strategies, and I feel like that kind of what it falls onto, where it's not bad, it's just different. And I think the biggest concern I have with it at this moment is that the iterations that we've seen about with it before, Spellitel, Spellguard from last meta, where it didn't feel fun to play against, and thus didn't really feel healthy overall for the game, where I think that it's a direction I'd like to see expanded on more. Just they got it wrong, and I don't want to see them get it wrong again.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of a control deck existing, but I don't know, the idea of weather basically makes it so that, like, when we're talking about the kind of control that I infer you mean specifically, Vishra, this would be something that plays either no units or almost no units. I mean, basically...
Look at Control Radovid right now, right? Control Radovid has, what, 9 units maybe? They have R2's Adepts, they have Redanian Knights, and their gold units. That's it. They might run like 1 or 2 silver units, but they run a very light unit package, probably like a little bit less than that, but they're close to a spell deck right now, and I don't think anyone complains about them existing in that aspect.
Yeah, I don't think they're quite as bad as the Spelltell or anything like that. I think something like that unit count is a pretty fair balance of things. Absolutely.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic. So, with this hotfix, you know, I mean, a couple of big changes to it. You know, some cards, good cards still good, bad cards still bad. Vabjorn should get changed at some point, I really hope. Just because I would like to... I have him, and I keep getting him for some reason, but I'd like to be able to play him in something. But, you know, this kind of cycle where it seems like if we're talking about this, you know, we're going to be arguing semantics here, I think, Vishra, you and me. But so this was the quote-unquote hotfix for the patch that we got about 2 weeks prior. Do we feel like this is, you know, a good content delivery cycle? Do we feel like, you know, having a patch and then maybe a couple weeks later a hotfix, and then, you know, another month to 2 months for another patch, and then maybe another hotfix? Or do we like that style, or do we think that there should be more of this more frequent things where, like, every couple of weeks we get one of these, like, hotfixes that changes things? And I'll go ahead and start us off. I'm a bit more of a fan. I'm more of a fan of. I like that they seem. I know people keep asking all the time, when does the season end, and no one knows for sure yet. And they always. It's flexible right now, especially since we're in beta and they're still testing things out. But I know that they've talked about wanting to do these 2-month cycles, and on the one hand, I really like the idea of having a patch be for that for a season. So like this season was played on this patch, but for 2 months that can be a really long time for the average player, and it can get if it's stale and like the meta gets solved and it gets into one of these bad metas that we've been in before, where you've only got 1 or 2 decks and everything else is below them, then I would like to see that get changed. But I don't know. I'm thinking, if we want to go with the 2-month cycle, I'd like to personally find a bit of a mix where we get like a patch that's like the season patch, where like this is the season 1 patch and here's all the changes, and then a month in we get a hotfix that fixes the most grievance of issues, but doesn't fundamentally change how that meta is played.
I personally find myself liking the style of more quick hotfixes, and this is going to be a very controversial one. A lot of people might be of the opinion that they should, you know, let the meta settle, and I do believe Vishra is of this opinion, that they should let the meta settle before, you know, so that they don't change things too fast, because it's too easy for them to overreact to things. But I like a very, very fluctuating meta personally. The more changes, the better. Obviously, I'm not proposing anything as ridiculous as a change a week, but I do happen to favor more frequent changes. What do you think, Vishra?
I'm a little bit weird in that I think my favorite time for playing Gwent and most card games in general is like directly after new content changes, because I think that's where you see the most exploration. You can do the cool, wacky things that people don't expect. Like, I think that's fun, but from an actual content perspective and from a patch cycle or like changes to the game, I'm much more of I'd rather let cycles be a little bit longer. Like, my ideal world would be about what Dale said, actually, where we get a content patch every 2 months, which is when the seasons should end, somewhere about that, and then there's like 1, maybe maximum 2 hot fixes in between there. I think that if you have a situation where the player base expects that if they complain enough, the devs will hot fix something, and then we see a hot fix like every 2 weeks to change things, I think that takes away a lot of the meta building and how a card game develops competitively. And I think that if you want to have Gwent be a competitive game and one that sticks around for a long time, you have to let the players build their own meta and develop things like counter decks, develop things like just other like top tier decks that do well. And that's when you start to see it like a cycle through the meta, and you start to see multiple decks appear. We had that kind of at the end of closed beta. And I think that if you patch too frequently, you kind of ruin that option. And if you do it too often then the player base starts to expect that. That's a bad thing.
I think we should remember we are still in beta. So the studio will try to fix everything. Like, for example, they did on the matchmaking ratio recently. So we shouldn't think about how long we will be the season or the hotfix or everything. We should wait the release of the game when it will be finished to be how can I say it? To be aware of what the future will be. We should remember we are in beta and just accept we could have some change or randomly, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks, sometimes 2 months. It's better to have a randomly hotfix or patch, because when there is a problem, it needs to be fixed as soon as possible. And if we have a very, very awful meta game, for example, because some decks are too OP or something like that, we don't want to wait 2 months or 1 month. We want to fix very soon. So I think we should not focus on the season or everything else. The time we'll see. The time will come and we will see what happened.
I guess my argument to that would be that if you do that and you have it where you patch, because it is beta, like you go ahead and you start doing that quickly, you still have a player base. It's a very large player base. We know that Gwent has a decently sized user base at this point. And if you do that, I don't want the devs to fall into that system where they patch like that for beta, and then when it switches to full release and we're there, that they still continue to patch in that. That's the thing that I'm kind of worried about. And I kind of want to see them kind of be a bit more hands-off and let us see, is a card actually too OP? Do we actually have a deck that's so suffocating that something needs changed like that quickly? Because I think outside of like Siri Dash back in February or March, we haven't actually had a deck that's been unbeatable like that. So I'm much more of an opinion that you need to balance it between making sure it's still a fun game to play and that you're moving the game forward in a beta state, and making it so that the players have some kind of expectation for your balancing tendencies in the future. And I think it's really difficult to get that balance accurate or like at a rate that will work well.
Only time will tell for that, but let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, which is so patch definitely saw some nerfs and buffs, and this is, I think we've maybe a bit of a recurring topic for the talk show, but is there any card specifically that you guys think didn't get nerfed that should have, or didn't get buffed and should have?
I want to take this moment. I want to take this moment to see what you guys think about Triss Butterfly spell right now. Because that card has been a bit of a flavor of the week right now. It's very, very powerful, especially in the Monster Swarm. In the Monster Swarm deck at the very least. And some people are saying it might be too strong, and it might be better if it had a limit to the number of targets it buffed. Now, I personally think that it probably could or should. Not necessarily a small limit. It could be something like, I don't know, 5 targets. What do you guys think? What do you think, Vishra?
Well, I did just craft a premium of that card, which is gorgeous, by the way. I don't like the idea of limiting it. I think that it's fine the way it is. I think that we haven't seen it. It's literally never seen played before this at any relevant amount. I think it's very meta-specific, and I think that that's fine to have a card that might be a little bit strong when metas kind of tilt towards it, but that otherwise isn't that great. And I don't know. I think the meta will adapt to it, and we'll see her go away soon, probably. But I like seeing her see played this way, and I think if you limited her to like X amount per turn, she probably wouldn't see that much play. A
really?
Big part of her,
if it was 5 right now.
Yeah, a big part of what she does is that if you play her early in a round, you have inevitability over the round, right? If you let that go 7, 8, 9 turns, and you play your units the right way, and you have them stack in their power level as you play her, she starts to grow that way. And while it is one of the few cards that doesn't have a limit that way, so does Yenkon. Like Yenkon can, if you play a game with all like 3, 4s, and 5s, she'll take over the entire game too, and we've seen that's totally fine at sometimes, and sometimes it's not. But
well,
I think
that's a very hard comparison to make, though, right? Because Yenkon affects the opponent's board, and Triss Butt affects your own board. In addition to that, having one more strength on top of that. Like, imagine, when you have 2 effects, one of which that buffs your own board and one of which that affects the opponent's board, generally the one, if you're going wide, that affects your own board is going to be much more powerful. Like, for example, imagine if Lacerate had a bronze counterpart that that was the opposite, buffing your own entire row by 3 points. Something like that would be pretty ridiculous on a bronze for the same reason.
I think we name it Hawk or Healer or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Vishra. That's a very good point.
Well, we have the gold analogy of Trispa, which is Yenkon. Like we have both of them. We have them there, and the difference with Lacerate is the Lacerate's a bronze, and it's like it's straight up removal in that aspect. And the difference is like they're both meta-specific cards, right? Trispud is super meta-specific and super deck-dependent. If I threw Trispud into your Dwarf deck, it would be awful. Like, I don't think anyone's going to argue that. Like, it's very deck-dependent with when it can be played, and it has its own specific counters, just like Yenkon does. Yenkon is just you naturally go tall with it, and you counter Yenkon. And to counter Trisput, like, I guess countering Trisput's a little bit more difficult, but the counters for it is super punishing. Like Epidemic, like I said earlier. Epidemic crushes that card. Lacerate crushes that card. Weather crushes that card actually super hard right now, and we've seen a lot of that with the Dagon decks. People are adapting and playing a range just to completely negate the card effect. So, like, I don't know. I think that card's probably fine. Not to set us off on a tangent here.
I don't think she's...
It's supposed to bring it up as a topic of discussion. But I think I agree with Vishra on this one, where I think this is the first that we've really seen Tourist Butterfly Spell come in as a competitively viable card. And I think that people just kind of forgot that there's counters. Where you're just like, oh yeah, Epidemic exists. Oh yeah, lining everything up at the same value really is never a good play when Scorch is a thing, when Gigni's a thing. And I think that as we see more of her, we'll start seeing less of her because people will be taking in these cards. And it goes back to what Mark was saying earlier, where you find ways to adapt. And as Vish was saying, the ways that you adapt against Triss Butterfly Spell are incredibly punishing to the person playing Triss Butterfly Spell.
Yeah, it's a gold card you can counter with, just for example, the Shackles. You can destroy the card, and it's over. So,
did we all forget that Shackles exists?
Yeah.
Not to interrupt you, but I haven't seen one in weeks.
Of course, Shackles exist. Yeah, I mean there's not enough it can really deal with right now. Honestly, I feel like.
So when you play Triss Butterfly, you have to wait a few turns when she became more and more powerful, and for the opponent it's very interesting because you have the Igni, you have Lacerate, you have Epidemic, you have plenty of answers. You just have to have to put the answers in your deck when you create it. So it's not a card very very difficult or important or overpowered. You just need to put the answers in your deck. If you
three D Shackles, 3 Epidemics.
for example, that's a good start.
Yeah.
After you put 3 Clear Skies and everything will be okay, and you have a spell tile. Oh wait, I'm against spell tile.
Got him. Dan in chat, shout out. He locked my Trisput yesterday. It was awful.
Well, I mean, so off of the Trisput, but this started out as, us talking about cards that we think should have gotten tuned up or tuned down off of the patch. Any other cards you guys think?
I mean, I'm with Dale. I want Vaburon to be playable. I like to see that card do something. I actually still think Drog needs touched up a little bit.
Yeah.
He's a card that I really like, and I love his effect. I think it's one of the most fun effects, actually, in Gwent, even though it is random and people always go a little Hearthstone with it. It's actually, like, a really cool effect, and the timing that you can use with it is actually, like, really interesting what you can do with it. But right now, it's just kind of below the power level of almost every other gold in the game, it feels like, even though it is a 14-point gold whenever you play it.
I agree. I honestly, I completely agree. I think the card is underrated. I do think it's like more playable than people give it credit for, but that being said, it does basically feel like a kind of worse version of Philippa, and cards like that are very interesting.
Or Imlerith.
Yeah. I mean, another one for me, a card that I feel, and this is another kind of bit of a hot topic right now. How do you guys feel about Foglet as a card? Because it's been pointed out that they're basically sort of like Imperial Golems on steroids, if you want to think about it that way. Yeah, no. I don't necessarily disagree with the sentiment behind that eye roll. But I mean, do you think that Foglets are perfectly fine as they are right now?
Yes.
Because the power level of that card is still very high. Now,
Not
of course,
really.
Really?
It thins the whole thinning your deck thing, but it's completely different than Imperial Golem, and saying it's on the same level is absolutely absurd, honestly. Like, it's not even a conversation in my own.
Three cards at 2 strength each that come from your deck whenever your leader ability get played is not comparable to 3 cards at 2 strength each that come when your leader ability gets played.
I mean, that is a bit different too, because like it's the whole weathering with Dagon. Like they're tied to something, and Imperial Golem is just you can put it in any deck. It doesn't cost you anything to do it. Like, I don't know. I've always felt like the Foglet v Imperial Golem argument is kind of silly. I think that they're fine. Honestly, it's a meta shift right now, and I think we'll see within the week that Dagon decks and Foglet decks in general are on the downswing.
Going back to the original question, overall I think Foglets are probably fine. They come out as being a little bit, maybe not necessarily stronger. If we want to do the Imperial Golem argument, probably definitely not as strong. But you get the benefit of being able to play them multiple times, but then that is automatically naturally countered by if your opponent's running Clear Skies, they just disappear. So it's in an interesting power level where it maybe is a little high, but it gets hard countered if your opponent has that hard counter, and I think that that's a fair trade-off for him.
And what are you going to do to them? Are you going to make them a 1-strength unit? That would be like, it wouldn't see play then if it's 1 strength. Are you going to make them a spy? They're not going to see play. Like, what are you going to do to them what are you going to do that makes them not see play then? Like that to nerf them, but that doesn't make them unplayable. I don't think something exists. I think that they're fine as a 2, honestly. The one weird change that it took me a minute to understand, actually, when I first picked the deck up again, is that they did subtly change the way that they work, and that they don't die when you move the fog off of that row. It's when fog is removed entirely from the board. So maybe you look at that and change that, but I don't even know if that's actually that big of a deal, because the only time that really comes up is in the weather mirror match. And now I think anyone's complaining about the mirror match, they're complaining about other factions against Dagon. So, Remar, anything that you think needs buffed or nerfed?
I think every time a unit is created or generated, it should be doomed after. Like, for example, the Knickers, when you create with the foglets, when you create with Knickers, for example, when you create more and more Aracas for your Hag, every time you create or generate a unit, it should be doomed. And that's the nerf on the how can I say, the hotfix I will do, because it will so the weather won't be a source of cry every day and everywhere, and it's same for the monster consume, and it will be the same for plenty of decks. For example, when Nilfgaard plays a Golem, at the 10 with a 10 strength, I can't remember.
Guardian?
Yes, the Guardian. Yeah, my bad. And it will be the same when the 6. The small golem he generates at the top of the
Lesser
deck.
Guardian.
Yes, the Lesser Guardian. There will be doom at the end, so the Katakan can't eat them. And I think that's what I think. And same for the foglets. So you won't have 8 or 9 foglets at the end of the play. Even if it's not a problem for me, it will be more logical if each mob generates will be doom at the end of the turn.
Well, on the subject of that, didn't Rethez, I think, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but Rethez made a comment in one of the Reddit discussions. I think it was either today or yesterday, actually. And one of the things he mentioned was that what we might see in the future is that cards that make their tokens will get their own unique tokens. And the big thing where that matters is with Arrakis Behemoth making Arrakises right now. You have to be careful with how you nerf Arrakis Behemoth right now, right? Because I don't know if they can actually add Doom to the tag that those ones that would spawn would give it, and I don't know that they necessarily want to, but if you make those tokens different than Arrakises themselves, it means that those tokens can be buffed or nerfed in the future and without being tied directly to Arrakis. So maybe that actually fixes a lot of that problem. But I don't think does any deck actually generate units other than the Guardian and monsters? I don't think any other faction really does right now, right? Since PFI is out of the game.
For example, you have in Scoia'tael, you have the Dolblatana Trapper, who created the Fireball.
Carcass, yeah.
Yes, that is doomed, though.
Carcass.
Carcass is doomed.
Yes, everything is doomed. So I think Aracas and everything, the foglets should be tokens, and then after that, it should be doomed.
Well, there's also the Selena Harpy as well. The Selena Harpy, the eggs are obviously doomed, but the harpies that come out of the eggs, which are indirectly spawned by the Selena Harpy, aren't. And that's a huge empowering force for Greyfag. I mean, Greyfags get an extra 4 to 6 points every game because of that interaction.
2 to 6.
Yeah. Depending.
There's 1 to 3.
Technically, it's 0 to 6.
Fair point. Anything else that you think needs buffed, maybe?
Well,
the god card from Skellige.
Pavjorn.
Yes, this one. Should be not fix or something else, because I don't know what there is this card in the game.
I think
Well, he's kind of like
theory.
old dog.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a theory that they just kind of like there's one designer who has all these crazy ideas, and they're just like, just make it a Skellige gold card.
Stick it in Skellige, call it a day.
Maybe it was a drunk game.
Original Wild Boar of the Sea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of Skellige golds, I'd actually like to see Berna get buffed, I think, slightly. That card's actually like really annoying to play against, Bernabrand, but right now she's kind of in a spot where I've seen her, I think, once in the last month and a half. So I won't mind seeing that.
If she received a small tweak, depends on the tweak, but that card could see play off of something relatively small.
Yeah, I agree. Its numbers are really close, actually, but there's just something with it that it doesn't function the way you want it to, unfortunately, with the way that things work right now. So it kind of doesn't see any play at all. I did see it slightly doing the Axeman meta, though, which was interesting. Skellige is like the testing grounds for all golds, though, it seems.
I think I'm gonna do something with Axeman.
Oh no!
I think there's potential there. Yeah.
Well, now that we've ruined the meta with Swim, let's move on.
So, I don't know, maybe somebody, one of you guys knows, but I'm being told that the Cockatrice and Viper School / Nilfgaardian Assassin are confirmed bronze cards. Where is that news at?
Yep, that was Burza when he was on the talk show. So Rethaz, when Rethaz was on the talk show, he showed us. They did show off images, right? It wasn't on the talk show. It was the last dev stream, right? They showed
the dev stream. They were
they showed the Cockatrice and they showed the Assassin dude, and they're both bronze cards. Yep.
Okay.
I don't remember if he said bronze or not. But.
Yeah. Well, no.
All right. Well, we know that these cards are coming in one way or another. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
When Rethaz was on the talk show 3 weeks ago, he did confirm that a pretty large majority of the new batch of cards, in which they previously said would be roughly 20 cards per batch, would be bronze cards.
Rethaz confirmed in chat just now that they are in fact bronze cards. Oh. Okay then.
All right. So with that, where do we think they fit in? So I mean, we have had. Cockatrice specifically, I remember from The Witcher 3 Gwent, so I would not be surprised to see that artwork come back. But where do we think that these cards, we're getting bronze cards basically for monsters, for Skellige, what archetypes do we think they're going to fit into? Where do we think these cards land? Just pure speculation.
Also, sorry to interrupt you, Dale, but Rethaz did just say in chat that 15 of the new cards will be bronze. So yeah. That might be 3 a faction. It might be 2 a faction and 5 neutrals. We don't know, but
that's a big deal. I mean, we have not had a patch like that. We've had all these new batches of cards. I remember way back in the day. This was back in December. The first time we got a batch of cards, there were like 3 bronzes, and some of the players were kind of upset about that. I remember specifically. I mean, well, I was one of them. But yeah, I mean, when you. The game is all about bronzes, and just having a bigger bronze diversity is so much more healthier than just having like golds and silvers to swap out in general.
Oh, he's apparently said it before. It's not a leak. He was the one leaking it before, and he's the one saying it again.
Yeah, no, he did say 15 out of 20 on the talk show 3 weeks ago. as well.
Let's go ahead and expand that a bit then. So, not just the Cockatrice, not just Viper School / Nilfgaardian Assassin. You know, out of the 20 new cards, we know that 15 of them are going to be bronze now. Where do we want these bronze cards coming in? Do we want... So that's, as I mentioned, that is a huge amount of bronze cards, and I think that we've seen it before. You add in a certain amount of bronze cards, and you can fundamentally change how decks are played. Let me go ahead and form this into a question, so it's not just me rambling. But do we want them to go into existing archetypes, and if so, what archetypes do we think need them, or do we want to see them try and introduce some new archetypes with these new bronze cards?
I think they should either promote archetypes which are kind of a little, let's say, failed right now. Let's say Armor Northern Realms is an example of that movement. Sure. Either promote ones that are lower down or introduce new ones. They don't necessarily need to flesh out any of the ones that are already really big and established. I mean, there are archetypes in the game that have more bronze synergy cards than they know how to use. Some by a wide margin, and some just use 30 bronzes. Call it a day.
I'm pretty sure those cards will be just a way to be patient, because it will be the next month. We will have the Gamescom, and there is a long time we haven't something new. I think they will show us something really, really big. For example, the one or two faction, or maybe we saw some pictures of the solo player mode. I think in August they will show us or give us a date for a day for the campaign, or for one or two faction. I think so. This 20 card will be just a way to be patient until Gamescom.
Yeah, and Berza did say when he was on the talk show 2 weeks ago that he referenced an August patch, and of course we know that their model, which they set forth, they basically told us very early on, and this won't necessarily happen throughout the full. This isn't necessarily something they're going to do for the next few years, but for right now, their model is they want to release 2 new cards every 20 new cards every 2 months, and that puts it in August sometime. That'll be interesting to look forward to. Speaking of things to look forward to, some of you also might be aware, I believe Remar referenced it just now, that Berza confirmed earlier that there will be apparently new factions coming to this game. That's what he said. It's on a Reddit post right now, actually. What do you guys think about that? And any of you who might think that they know more about Witcher lore than I do,
I'm out.
What do you guys suspect or hope that they might implement?
Zerrikania, all that I want.
Ooh.
For those who don't know, it's basically like the southern continent, which the Witcher universe, within Geralt and his touching in the Witcher universe, doesn't really get touched on that much. And it's kind of it's like a mixture of a lot of African and Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cultures, that kind of it's a very big mixture of stuff actually. We know that we'll probably see I'm liking the name, the Blood and Wine group that are Nilfgaardian.
Toussaint.
Yeah, we'll probably see Toussaint be part of Nilfgaard because they're not big enough for their own faction, but I think Zerrikania is the most obvious one that we don't have in the game right now.
Yeah. And as we know, I mean, the devs have said specifically that they do want to use Gwent as an opportunity to expand the universe, so it is entirely possible they'll come up with new factions as well, probably further down the line if they want to keep making factions.
And I want it to be orange, because I think an orange card back will look
No, it's
You have an orange chair swim!
No, not an orange.
No, like a classy orange.
Is it even possible?
I don't know. Let's all look at swim really quickly here for an idea. What do you think, Remark? What would you like? Since I know that you're pretty big on Witcher lore.
I hope it won't be Toussaint, because Toussaint is a part of Nilfgaard, and I hope it won't be Kovir, because Kovir is a part of Northern Realm. I think it will be or Zerikania or what's the other name? The country where Bork comes from.
That is, he's Zerikania. No.
Ophir?
Yeah. I don't know. I can't remember what the pronunciation for it is, but the people he was with were from Zerikania.
Someone is. Yeah, I was just saying. Someone in chat saying we might get NL too.
There's no way we can get NL.
Yeah, NL's already in monsters, right?
Well, we already have multiple NL cards, but the issue is that they'd have to make they'd have to basically build the faction from nothing because we don't really have that many characters in the Witcher lore from the NL.
But they've said they were willing to add on and build something from nothing.
Exactly.
That's a big thing to build on, though.
That's true.
We'll see. Like, part of them are the Wild Hunt, so like we already have some of them referenced, and we already have Avalak, who's one of, and like there's only like I think there's 2 or 3 named characters we don't have right now, right? Of them, there's not many that aren't named. So to do them, you'd have to build it all from scratch. And I think that there's other more interesting areas to build from right now, instead of building them as their own faction.
I would say the biggest problem with an NL faction would be just the fact that some of them are already in monsters, and then you can't really move them.
Alright, well, let's go ahead and you've all been waiting patiently for this portion of the talk show, but let's go ahead and open it up to viewer questions. So if you have anything that you'd like to ask us, anything that you want to bring us up for a point of discussion.
Just at first, there is one thing we didn't talk about. Oh yeah, what happened 10 days ago? 10 days ago. What happened 10 days ago?
We did not talk about it. 9 days ago.
Yeah. 9 days ago. Yeah, my bad.
Man, I completely forgot.
You thought I would forget it? No.
I wasn't part of this.
We were hoping that it would just go under the rug a little bit. At least the score. The casting was nice.
The casting was blasting.
I wanted to talk about because, like I saw in the chat on Twitch, people keep talking about the matchmaking ratio, and they were talking about the matchmaking ratio during the casting because they said, French people got only 2k MMR and they are playing at 3 or 4k MMR, but we won. And it's not about just winning; it's about in Gwent the game is very young, and that's why everyone should try to play each tournament as possible, because you don't need to have a high MMR to be a winner to win the tournament. That's why, for example, the TGO is very important because everyone can be a part of it. So if you think you could try to win, try to defeat some great people, because there are plenty of good players in this tournament. You should try, and it's not about just matchmaking ratio. You could win even if you are a low MMR.
Yeah,
and real quick, for anyone who didn't follow our little logic jump there, we back on July 4th for Independence Day here in the States, there was the cast of the Gwentlemen versus the French community, and we lost 2-5, but we tried. But if you are interested in seeing those games and seeing that cast, it is up on our YouTube video, our YouTube at youtube.com/Gwentlemen, Team Gwentlemen, sorry, don't forget the team part, and I believe that it's up on the French community site as well, and I don't know that one. I believe it's just Gwent.fr. Remark?
Excuse me.
Your website.
Yeah, excuse me. What did you ask to me?
Your website for the French community.
The website, excuse me. I saw it turned in the chat who make me upset.
All I'll say is that we'll be retaking that when we bring our A team next time.
Oh,
gonna have Swim in the Doors lead the charge next time.
Yeah. No, I think you guys bring up a really good point though. R3mark, you were saying that people kind of maybe read a little bit too much into the MMR scaling of these things. People are always like, I very, very fixated on MMR as a measure of skill, and I think that's just I don't know. People go kind of overboard with that. Like, take me for example. I'm 4,300 and I'm terrible.
I think like a lot of times it's because people look at it as, they're trying to see how well they stack up against other players, and the only thing that they have to compare themselves with is that rating system, and it only matters for ladder. It doesn't, as was shown with the Gwentlemen versus French community, it simply does not matter in a non-ladder format whenever it comes to tournament play. It's just a number, and I think you're right. People do get fixated on it sometimes, and it's something to just keep in mind, because it's not without its own merit, but you have to remember that it's not the end-all, be-all merit.
Yep, that's totally fair.
All right, so let's go ahead and go back to these viewer questions. And by the way, it's gwentfr.com for the website. But so our first viewer question: why not multi-faction cards? We have multi-faction cards.
Hearthstone had some of those, right?
Yeah, they are called neutral, in fact. I don't know that it would work if you have them so they're only split between 1 and 2 factions. I think that each faction is different enough that if you cross them, they won't really work well in a lot of situations. Like, how would you make a bronze that works in like Skellige and like Northern Realms?
Priestess
and have it like make sense. But they got rid of that because they were the same card. I don't know. Like I don't think that
I could see it. I mean, there's already effects in the game that are basically cross-faction effects, like Asir and Aneki do, and I know the cards aren't exactly the same, but they do basically the same thing. They have effectively the same function, and there's other examples of that. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not necessarily a proponent of this idea, but it could work. I guess one of the biggest problems with this is, unlike in Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering, in terms of like a lore perspective, it might be more cumbersome to fit in, like, I guess, a character that can operate between factions as it would be. I mean, in Hearthstone, basically, classes just represent... I'm not really sure what classes represent. But
they represent a class, Swim.
No, but blending classes is kind of easier than blending factions lore-wise, because blending classes are much more so a kind of direct representation of, I guess, a kind of playstyle more so than factions, whereas factions have lore implications as well, I guess.
Yeah, I think that we're much more likely, instead of seeing like things that are cross-factional, I think we're more likely to see certain types of characters go into other factions. And I think Gravez has hinted at this when he was on the talk show, that they want to try to increase the versatility of like the different cards. So part of why Lebrican and Botchlin are still in Northern Realms and not monsters now is they don't need just to have just soldiers with swords and armor as the units. They want to increase diversity that way and show things like that. So in that aspect, you could have something, in fact, that would work across different factions. Trollolo is a Northern Realms card that technically is a monster. So like, you could do it within the lore. To me, that kind of a thing has always felt gimmicky. It feels gimmicky in Hearthstone with what I've played with it, and I played it a lot during that expansion during Hearthstone. And I just don't think that you need it. I think that we have neutral cards, and I think that once we have more factions and more expansion that way, I think that there'll be a lot of other stuff to do. I don't think you really need to expand that way.
Yeah.
So it could be done, but I don't think we need to.
I'd agree.
Any thoughts on multi-faction cards, Remar?
No, nothing in my mind, actually.
Fair enough. Well, our next viewer question: do we see a long-term problem in Katakan, Caretaker, and Vicovaro Medic generally countering most Skellige strategies?
The graveyard hate argument.
The graveyard hate argument.
Ooh. Well.
And while I leave, I'm gonna I need to step away for just a minute to let you all discuss that. I'll be right back.
Mark, I think everyone's pretty clear on my take on this, because I've been very vocal about this in the past. What is your opinion?
Wait,
here?
no. Wait, what's your take on it, Vishra? I don't remember.
No. Mine's a long soliloquy. I'm gonna just not get into it right now. I'm gonna let Remar go first here, I think. I'm curious to hear his opinion without mine.
Opinion about
Where you stand on graveyard hate. Basically, Vicovaro medics, Caretaker Catacan, the ability to shut down many strategies, most notably referenced as Skellige strategies, and kind of keep things from seeing play. For example, you might know that clan, skirmishers has not. Yeah.
No, like I said, you have to build the game, and when you it was that life coach said, when there is a move, you should be able to answer to that move. So if a faction like Skellige is playing with the graveyard, you should be able to break the graveyard, and it's not really how can I say? It's not really a problem for me if you can break the opponent graveyard. You should be able to do that, and you should not break that this mechanic. You recover medic, Katakan, everything. It's perfectly fine for me, and it's a risk. It's you put yourself in danger when you play skirmisher, for example, but it's worth it if you succeed. So it's a part of the game. If you succeed, you have a huge creature, a huge mob, but if you fail, you give a huge mob to the opponent. So it's a risk, you have to take it. If you want to take it, you should assume the consequences, but if it's okay for you, well, okay, that's what I think. I'm not sure I am really clear.
Oh no, I'm in the exact same camp.
Oh.
I'm in the camp of, if counters need to exist in games. This isn't just let's both throw stuff at the wall until it sticks and see who has a higher score. And I've always liked the dynamic that Squaretel doesn't care about anything other than spells, and then monsters in Nilfgaard hate the graveyard, and Northern Realms and Queensguard and Skellige play with the graveyard. So you have two factions that want to use the graveyard and two that want to attack the graveyard, and I like that dynamic. If anything, I'd like to have more graveyard hate and have it be neutral, which is why we have things like Necromancy, why that got printed, was so we had neutral ways to hate that out, so every deck wasn't stuck running Catagan or running Vicovar Mega or stuff like that. But I've always been of the opinion that you need to expand on that type of thing and not make it something that just basically removing effects from the game.
Maybe Vicovaro should be a silver card, the medic, because you should be able to break the opponent's graveyard, but only for a silver or gold card, not a bronze card. I think
Gold breaks it.
Excuse me?
Ghoul
breaks it.
Yeah. Ghoul it has the downside of being random. Of course, this is mitigated against something like a turn 1 Queensguard, Brandon's a Queensguard play, but against other strategies.
I don't know. Griffin also is targeted graveyard hate. It doesn't resurrect it, but it's also targeted graveyard hate as a bronze.
Yeah, should do something about that too. But
no,
if I can run hate like Scorch effects to negate my opponent's board, I should be able to run hate to negate their graveyard. I'm all for that personally. Let me just hate on everything.
Well, speaking of hate, let's go ahead and move into our next viewer question, which is specifically for Vishra. Because Vishra's hating. Can you explain why foglets wouldn't be played at 1 strength? They provide thinning and apply fog to the other side of the board. They can also come out multiple times. Golems will be played at 0 strength, so why would it be a bad nerf?
Golems would get played at 0 strength because you can put them in any deck with Nilfgaard with their old ability when they came out right away. Yeah, you could with them here at that point. You theoretically can put it in any Nilfgaard deck and any leader in the future that they have, and it thins automatically regardless of what your leader ability is. The only leader that functions like that in Monsters is Dagon. Would you play John Calvite if he pulled you just a fog effect? You wouldn't, right? Calvite would be awful in that situation. Dagon is only playable in its current form because of the way that foglets interact with it. And if you nerf foglets by that point, they're too low of a tempo swing, I think, to actually play. I think golems are a different scenario than that, right? Golems have that ubiquitousness that can be put in any different deck within the faction, whereas foglets require very specific cards to be played and very specific things to be done in the deck to actually get that pulled out that way.
I feel like we're just seeing it again too, where it's all these. It's when cards are in triplicate that those 1 strength changes just are not a 1 strength change. It's a 3 strength change, and we've seen it with foglets, we've seen it with golems, we've seen it with Queensguard. Anything that tries to pull out itself from the deck, it's very hard to get that balancing act right. So, oh, maybe something needs to be. I think it's just it feels weird because it's part of like how Gwent is designed with the bronze cards, where you can have 3 of each, so it makes sense to pull out the other 2. But it almost feels like it'd be a little easier if it was only pulling out like 2 copies. So you just have the base card and its copy. You don't have all 3 of them. You just have 2. But I don't know. Like it's always a weird situation that we've been in whenever we have these cards in triplicate, that you can't just change them by 1. You can't change them by a half because the game doesn't work like that. So it's always something to keep in mind whenever you have a 1 strength nerf or a buff to a card that has 3 of its copies that are played every time. It's not just that 1 strength nerf, it's a 3. And 3 is a very large number in Gwent.
And specifically something like Foglets and Queensguard, those are the 2 where it really matters, because those cards are designed with the idea that you'll play them multiple rounds. So you're effectively nerfing them like 9 points then, instead of just 3 points. That's been one of the issues with Queensguard traditionally, is that anytime you see them nerfed a point, it's 9 points over the course of a game, and that's actually an insanely high amount of points. For a lot of decks, it's like 10% of their total strength, actually.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big deal when you do that. So you have to be cognizant with cards like that. Golems is a little bit different too, because Golems are a one-time thing, where Foglets, their entire idea is you get them every round. So it's something to keep in mind then when you think about those kind of nerfs.
Yeah, I mean, 9 points is the difference of 9 points will probably swing a literal majority of games. Probably more than 50% of games will get swung by that difference of 9 points. It is very, very hard to balance those kinds of cards, which leads me to another question, a suggestion for Foglets. What do you think if Foglets started at 3 strength but lost 1 strength effort every time they come out, basically, so that the first time they come out they're 3 strength, the second time they're 2 strength, and the third time they're 1 strength, and then they're dead?
Like they did for Morkvarg on the Olgierd?
Yep. Yeah. Something, sort of.
Yeah, it will be very fair, in my opinion.
That would be basically, that kind of creative solution would be probably the best way to get around not being able to tweak their strength up and down normally. What do you think, Vishra?
I'm unsure. It's a different card in my opinion, right?
Yeah. No,
it's functionally just a completely different card, so I have no idea how that would work.
For me,
I like them the way they are personally.
I do as well. From a it's not even like a lore perspective. Like, sort of that perspective. Like, I think that something like that would be cool for any card that brings something out of the graveyard. Priestesses being an exemption, like, it takes effort of something in order to be able to resurrect it, and like that being represented on the card would be kind of cool. Like, it's kind of represented like with priestesses, because you're having to spend a bronze card in order to bring something out. That's the effort is on this card being a lot lower stat than it normally would be. But something like that, where like every time it comes out of the graveyard, like with Morkvarg with Olgierd, like it can't just claw your way back too easily. It takes something of the strength back. That just sort of like a flavorful. There we go.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. But from a gameplay standpoint, I agree with Vishra. It's really hard to tell because it is fundamentally a different card at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
If anything, Foglets would be like banish yourselves and bring them back, because they're not like technically dying, I guess. They're just like disappearing into the fog. I don't know. Foglets have always been weird to me in that way.
Yeah.
They don't resurrect themselves, so.
Yeah, right. They should be like those different dimension guys from Yu-Gi-Oh! They should banish themselves and then.
DD Foglet.
Yeah.
Rename them. DD Foglet.
That's exactly.
They'll just give us the next question, please.
Well, our next viewer question is specifically for Swim. So, Swim, how do you develop your decks? Do you have any specific structures you look for when you're deck building?
That question would... that would take me like half an hour to answer. There are a lot of different approaches that I take, and different decks kind of use different ideas. I don't know how thorough of an answer I'm going to be able to give in this time frame. However, I will say that I'm working on a really, really extensive guide for like kind of deck building theories. How do I answer that question simply, though?
You usually build more around like a card or a concept than you do like a deck. Like you don't build like with this is what this deck is going to do, and then you add the cards you start with. Hey, here's Burn a Brand and Axeman. Let's build around that.
Yeah, basically. The simplest tip I can give is if you look for a card, specifically, typically a bronze card, because these are 3-ofs rather than 1-of, but you look for a card, you figure out a way to basically enable that card's value really well. Like, for example, you can think of the Dwarf deck as effectively a way to generate a ridiculous amount of value out of Mahakam Defenders. You take a bronze card, you figure out how to abuse it to gain more than 15 points. And then you build the deck around that concept. That is one concept that I've applied to some of my decks.
Well, the next viewer question, why is Vishra so sad today? That's coming from Berza. Berza is picking up on you being a little sad today, Vishra.
Vishra, are you sad?
I'm not sad. I'm just tired, Berza, because it's still dark outside. And it's early morning my time, so I'm just tired. But I am drinking during the morning, so maybe that's the problem.
Oh, maybe you are sad, Vishra. Honestly, no, hang on. If you need someone to talk to, Vishra, you know that you can.
My body naturally thinks it's still 5:30 at night, not 5:30 in the morning.
Oh, I see. So
I'm allowed. I'm allowed.
At 5:30, it's fine. Okay. No, I got you.
Yeah, I can't drink at 5:30 in the afternoon because then it's 5:30 a.m. for me. Okay, that's what we're gonna go with.
All right. Well, our next viewer question: what do we think about Gravehag?
Well, this is a controversial one, and I'm gonna. And again,
You're micless.
I'm personally gonna. Well, hang on. I'm personally gonna go and I'm going to guess that both Vishra and Remar aren't of the opinion that it needs or should be changed. Is that correct?
I was just gonna not comment at all since chat's telling me I have like a huge monster bias.
Wait, what?
I know, right? Shocker that.
Just you?
Me? Never. No, I am of the opinion that it's totally fine.
What do you think?
Actually.
No, the question was asked by a French because we spoke about it during many days, and I said them if you need a rework on the Gravehag, it's because you need to improve your skill.
Yeah.
So that's why they come here and try to have a different answer. Said, no. You have, like I said, you have to build your own victory, and if you are defeated by a Gravehag, maybe you did something wrong during the game. So you don't need to change anything with a Gravehag. It's perfectly fine.
I will say I have one thing I actually would change with it. I don't like that it's agile. I prefer it goes back to being row locked. But that feeds into my whole I don't think that agility should be as common as it's becoming, or it shouldn't be more common in the future. I think that if you make it row locked, I think you add enough other answers between weather and other effects that you could actually then it would be totally fine. No one could ever complain about it then. If you could just slam a frost down on that row and then you know it's taken care of, I think that would be fine.
But weather can't kill it.
You wouldn't kill it.
Weather can never
kill it. No, it wouldn't.
You
never mind.
Yeah,
right. I mean, old Spirit Tip kills it, then you could have a Lieutenant Trapper kills it then. Like, there are other things that then you could guarantee would kill it that you can't guarantee it now.
It's mostly just those two cards, I think, right?
I think there's more than that. I know I was thinking of a couple other ones the other day, too, that would interact with it. But I can't off the top of my head right now. But overall, I think the card, like, its power level is fine as it is. Succubus.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's a fair suggestion, but I would say that it might do better if it had a 2-turn timer, personally. And don't get me wrong, you guys have fair arguments, but basically a large part of the people complaining about it is absolutely true that you can play around it, and you can play for a different win condition. And I'm by the way, I'm not suggesting a direct nerf. It could have like some points or something to compensate. But in terms of the
nerf, though,
in terms
that's
of
a ridiculous nerf.
Yeah, I mean, but it could easily. I mean, imagine it as like a 6-point unit then.
It would have to be like at least a 6.
I'm not suggesting exactly a specific number of points. I'm not suggesting just make that change and nothing else. But at the same time, it does give probably too much focus on who gets the last play. And as much as I'm not arguing this from a personal perspective. Personally, I'm in the same boat as you guys. I agree that, I mean, I kind of like the nuance of it. I like that it creates certain games that incentivize the last play. Absolutely. Because it creates kind of unique situations where you're playing for more of a different focus than a normal game. But that's, honestly, it's not something every player is going to really be able to fully appreciate and play around at the same time.
Like I said sooner, if the Arakas, the spiders, are just token, then at the end of the turn they are doomed. You won't have any problem with.
If a change like that happens, then it's at that point it's up in the air where Gravehag's power.
Do you think it needs buffed then? Actually, if that happens. That's taking off at least like 10 points off of the average Gravehag, right?
Yeah, that's taking off a lot.
Actually, the hag is not a problem for me. I don't really care about it, so it's okay. So if players want any change about the hag, maybe we should think about any logic, like for all the tokens at the end of the turn they are doomed. So we create some logic for the hag and the spiders, and we won't have any problem.
Yeah.
Except for the players of Monster.
Vishra is right there. It definitely would actually need some kind of buff if Arrakis is spawned by behemoths. We're doomed because it goes to average, what, like 15, 16 points at that point.
Yeah, at that point you're better off just running a catechin.
King of Beggars.
Like King of Beggars. Like that at that point it's probably like below average silver for the risk that you take with it. So. I know it's a risky card. Like that's always been the thing with Gravehag. It's a very risky card. Yeah, it's a very feast or famine type card, and I like that overall card design.
Well, our next viewer question: what are some of our other favorite games, other than Gwent?
Games. I don't really play video games. I'm at a loss. I can't remember the last video game I've played. Hang on.
Played The Witcher 3 on stream like a month ago.
I'm pretty sure that was the last one. I don't think I've played a video game since then.
Overwatch.
I have not played Overwatch since the last time I've played Witcher 3.
Well, I think that the most recent thing that I've been playing a lot of Diablo 3 lately because the Necromancer class came out, and it's actually really fun because my childhood was like playing Diablo 2. So, playing a lot of that. Also playing what is that game called? Oh, a game called Stonehearth, which is not Hearthstone. I promise I'm not dyslexic.
That's what you say.
What about you, Mark?
Oh.
Or you, Dale? Either one.
I'll let Remar go.
Another game. Qu'est-ce que je joue? Actually, I'm trying to see the end of Alien Isolation. But I'm too scared. Try to work in the ship, so I play only maybe 1 hour a week. Then I'm scared. I go and cry in the shower. I go and whine about the Gravehag on the forums, and then I try to play.
Okay. For me, I've always played Final Fantasy XIV as kind of my other game, my other love other than Gwent. Always really enjoyed the story on that one. Other than that, I really don't have time to play any. It's hard finding time.
Yeah, exactly.
To do things, so
how do you guys find time for video games of all things?
We'll well, our next viewer question for Remark is the get better to beat this card idea based on the assumption that the card is already well designed.
Oh, excuse me. Can you?
Sure. So the whole get better in order to beat this card, you have to get better. Is that based on the assumption that the card that you have to beat is already designed in a good spot?
I think you can focus only on one card when you try to win a game, and if you just focus about, oh my god, he will have the hag at the end, no, you miss something. You have the hag will be very powerful at the end of the third turn, and if you have to wait till the third turn to win, you miss something, because you have 2 turns at first to build something against the. You can lock the run. You can destroy the Arvacas at first. You can banish the Nakers. You have plenty of answers. It's just because at the moment people don't want to or don't think about any answers they could put in the in the deck. For example, nobody actually is playing Shackles, and against monster consume, you can destroy the Elder. When the Elder is like a 45 or a 50, you can lock him, then Igni, and you destroy 50, and you can win a round. So I don't think
2 cards. I have to spend 2 cards to beat your Elder?
Yeah, but how many cards do you need to have a hag very powerful? You need plenty of cards. So
I'm just making a facetious joke.
Yeah, no. Yeah, but people should think like that, or maybe it's like when you are playing Nilfgaard with Leto. You have to use 2 cards to be very powerful. You have to put Letos and you have to put the D-bomb. It's the same. You have if you want to destroy the Elder, if you want to banish the Nickers and everything else, you have to use many cards. Yeah, but if you win, it's worse. It's not really, doesn't really matter, in my opinion.
All right. Well, our next viewer question is actually, hey, I got a question for me. Do I think that Carryover should be changed even more, looking at bronze cards like the Dwarfs or Harpy Eggs? Me personally, I always think that Carryover is just a fundamental issue, I guess, would probably be the best way to describe it, because you look at Gwent, and one of the things that makes it unique is that it's a built-in best 2 out of 3 system, and that's always really cool, where it's like, okay, my cards are my resources, I've got to be able to ration these out appropriately. And Carryover always felt like a way to cheat the system, where you're like, all right, cool, I'm going to throw all this points in, and then I have an next round too.
It's supposed to be a binary win or lose, and Carryover kind of cheats that a little bit.
So do I think that they should be changed more? Probably. I'd like to see overall maybe a hard cap on how much you can carry over. I'm not sure how well that would work, but something along those lines, because we've seen time and time again where that carryover can be abused. Going back to the very beginning of closed beta with trebuchets and making them golden and just having these giant, powerful things. To more recently, I think we had something similar, a little bit more counterable with Swim's Letho shenanigans. But it's always I don't think no matter what meta we're in, no matter what patch we're in, we're always going to be complaining about carryover, and so I would not mind seeing it get reduced significantly.
Well, counterpoint here. If you do that, then you have to nerf things like Queen's Guard, right? Because those are decks that are putting their strength into future rounds, but they're not doing it by keeping the needle on the board.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
that's nerfing a lot of stuff in the game. That's nerfing like Queen's Guard, Neckers, like half of Monster stuff is based around that. Like all the veteran tags are just naturally things that let you get better the later the game goes. So don't you think that might be changing too much about what the game does in general?
I see it more of an issue. I like that type of carryover. I see it more of an issue whenever we're like adrenaline rush type carryover, where you have all these points available to you, and you have the same amount of points available to you the next round. It never went anywhere. Whenever we talk about things like Queen's Guards, like Morkvarg, trying to think of a non-Skellige example.
Hawker support, Hawker, or V-Head Vanguard, or Dragoon.
Or Spotters, or like any of these types where you're building the mulligan with the other dragoons, I think of it. I don't know. I see that as like I definitely understand the. I don't know if it's necessarily hypocrisy, but I see that as more of like the healthier way of doing carryover, because it's not carryover that's going to win you the immediate round that you're in, but you're investing into the future rounds in some other way. So
Adrenaline Rush doesn't win you the round that you play it, though. Adrenaline Rush is a 0 tempo card.
It's a complicated subject, and I'm going to divert that question. Overall, I am not happy with the current state of carryover, and I would like to see it reduced. But the way that you do it, I think there's a healthy way of doing it, I think there's an unhealthy way of doing it, and I'd like to see more of the investing into future rounds without it affecting your current round, but not in the same way that Adrenaline Rush does.
Yeah, I definitely agree with certain parts of that. I mean, we have seen throughout the history of the game, almost always patches are dominated by strategies that can enable really huge carryover in some way. Or that just play with carryover better than the slightly weaker strategies do. That's such a recurring theme when you go back all 8 months. Like all the decks that rise to the top use some form of carryover and kind of abuse it. I mean, even back to like Squirtel Marjo, old Broken Dwarfs, etc. And I don't know. Honestly, to a degree, I don't think you can really fundamentally change that. In certain cases, I think carryover has a little more potential than it should, but ultimately, I wouldn't necessarily change more than a couple, maybe tweaks to certain carryover cards. I'm not sure. It is a difficult topic to get into, and I do agree with Vishra. You can't really just have a hard and fast rule for just like board-based carryover, because so much of the carryover that we've seen in these top-tier decks has been like graveyard-based.
Graveyard hand deck.
Yeah, the old hand buff Squirtel with Dragoons that was so incredibly dominant as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, well,
deck-based with Necker Warriors and Neckers.
Monster Nest, all the good old days.
Yeah, Monster Faction passive.
So Dale, is that time again? Is it time for our daily coin flip question?
I do filter the questions a little bit, and the coin flip I see all the time, and I just want to. Every time I see them, just watch literally any other past talk shows. Our VODs are up on YouTube.com/Team Gwentlemen. You'll hear us talk about the coin flip at some point.
Okay, I'll accept that, I guess.
No, actually, I think it's about that time for the end of the talk show, actually. So I do want to let's go around, do any closing statements. Remar, thank you very much for agreeing to do this with us. Thank you very much for being here. I know it's late for you, but any shout-outs, anything that you want to say?
Currently, I'm trying to create a leaderboard of each players who won a tournament, in order to create maybe at the end of the season a tournament with players who won the most of a tournament actually. And I have plenty of projects, because I'm not a pro player or something like that. I'm trying to improve or to increase the community in France, and working with, for example, with Gwentlemen and communities all around the world. And I have plenty of projects, like the Fight Night we did last week. And I hope we will meet again with other good stuff. And that's all. And thank you for the invitation. I feel honored.
I know we've got to definitely meet up again at some point for Gwentlemen versus French community rematch.
No, it's okay. We won. It's okay. we got the glory, the pride. It's okay. We won't. Oh, yeah, maybe with pleasure. Maybe in September, because actually I think there are many players are in vacation, and we'll see. But why not? Of course.
Looking forward to it. Vishra, any shoutouts?
Shout to Berza. He's my boy. And speaking of community tournaments with the French community, didn't we have something coming up here? For me, it's today. Don't we have a? Isn't there a
announcement
tournament going on? Yeah.
Tournament
thing.
Announcement.
This
Wait,
thing?
are you talking about an announcement or a tournament?
I don't know which it is. Hang on.
Ooh. We're not ready to announce yet, if that's what you're talking about.
No, haven't that. Nah, never mind then.
Yeah, don't worry.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about
This is all. It'll all be clear next week on this talk show. We will have something to announce then.
Leaks.
Leaks.
It's something I'm personally a bit excited for.
Same.
But I'm not gonna tell you what it is for about 7 days.
Swim and I are going to go talk about it right after this. Anyway, Swim, how about you for shoutouts?
Oh, I'd like to give a no, that's not. I'm good.
Shout out to your cat
I don't know. She's
that you stole.
what? What?
Did you say this is like someone you just found it outside and took it in the house?
All right. Well, as always, my shoutouts will go towards get into tournaments. If you've not gotten into tournaments, at least try them out. And there's always these weekly tournaments going on. Good Gaming Tournament on Sunday, Bowstring Tension Cup every Monday, TCG Weekly Esports every Tuesday. Like, you have so many opportunities to do them, and they're so much fun, and they're so unique, and they're so different from ladder. They're so different from casual mode that I just want everybody to at least be able to get a chance to experience it. Check out Gwent.reddit.com. What is? I don't want to know.
Someone in chat said he stole Cat on Crate from Skellige Isles. Can we please name the cat on Crate?
I want to, but she's not really, in that whole, she's not about that.
But also check out Gwent.reddit.com to be able to get you to the official subreddit for Gwent. From there, you can find a link to the official Gwent Discord. And actually, speaking of Discords, there is a new Discord out there specifically designed to help out newer players who want to ask questions. It's actually just called Ask Gwent. I believe that we've got the link should be coming to you shortly in the chat. But it's a really cool initiative to try and help out newer players with the community. So definitely check them out and ask and answer questions. If you, I know I plug it a few times. Our YouTube's over at youtube.com/Team Gwentlemen. And speaking of our website, it's going to be over at Gwentlemen.com. We try and put up articles for you. We list all our VODs. The VOD of this show will be up on there shortly. And check out GwentFR.com. Remar, come on, man, you gotta represent. But no, I think that's about all that I have. You can also check all of us out on Twitch. Myself with twitch.tv/thewhitewolf, Vishra90, Swimstream.
That's
Huh?
that's nah.
And Remar, I believe you stream as well, right?
Yeah, I stream on but you will find the link on the website. It's our Twitch/Gwent_FR.
All right.
Perfect.
And we will be back on this channel next Thursday for the next talk show. We'll have some fun things to talk about. We normally do, but
Something juicy.
Until
Going
then,
to swim.
Huh?
What?
Wait, no, I didn't hear you.
Huh?
What'd you?
Oh no, don't worry about it. No.
You just.
Until next week, have a good week, everybody, and thank you all very much for tuning in, and we'll see you again next Thursday.
Bye.